Now, yesterday we learned of the passing of legendary GAA commentator Mícheál Muircheartaigh at the age of 93.
We could try to summarise the passion Mícheál had for the game, but it's far better to hear it from the man himself. Take a look.
The one thing about sport, you can't be sure the day before what's going to happen. It was an adventure to me.
Yeah.
And every game, looking forward, hoping for the best.
Yeah.
You couldn't have a better thing than hope, you know, and that's the way I train players. I say, you must have hope, strong hope that you're going to be better than ever this year. And if it doesn't work, there's always the next year.
There he was, Mícheál Muircheartaigh. And like we've been saying all morning, Mícheál really was the golden voice, the presence, the embodiment of Gaelic games.
Yes, absolutely. And we are joined by some colleagues and friends of his in years gone by. Michael Lester, former radio TV presenter who would have worked with Mícheál over so many years. Jarlath Burns, president of the GAA, and Kieran Donaghy, former Kerry footballer as well, joins us on Zoom. Good morning to you, Kieran. Jarlath, as president of the GAA, can you just sum up, I mean, the passion that Mícheál had for the game and how important he was to the organisation of the GAA?
I suppose in a very complex world, in a world where so much is false and almost plastic, Mícheál was authentic. He was an authentic voice. Whenever you listen to him, he really transported you right into the game. And it's so important whenever you're listening to a game on radio in particular, that you develop trust with the commentator, that what the commentator is telling you is almost a dialogue between yourself and the commentator. And Mícheál had that incredible ability to feel that he was communicating with you personally, that it was just himself and yourself. And I know that whenever with Silverbridge we used to play games in Lurgan or whatever, and you'd be coming back and you'd be listening to the son, to Mícheál talk about the first half of a match between Kerry and Dublin or whatever. I remember my dad used to stay in the car. We would go in and watch the second half of the game. My dad would stay in the car and listen to Mícheál, and we'd be looking out of the window. I remember my mum saying, "What's Dad doing?" He's listening to Mícheál, and that was just an accepted thing. He would rather listen to Mícheál than actually come in and watch Michael Lester on the television. Sorry about that. But I spoke to Eamon and myself. Eamon, his son, and myself would be quite friendly, and I spoke to Eamon yesterday. They were so thankful for all of the wonderful tributes that have been paid, and thankful that they had him for so long. And we do send out our sympathies to Helena and to all of his family, and to Darren, who was his sidekick, who would have been a spotter, who you always saw one without, you never saw one without the other. They're a wonderful family.
And Darren had to move away from sitting directly beside him because he'd be punching people when things would happen in the game. The nicest man in the world. Michael, he was ye. You know, ye were all together in this big gang, ye doing the analysis, and Mícheál commentating and on the radio and bringing GAA to us. What was it like to work with him, to know you were going to hear some poetry that day about sport?
I think I was listening as I was coming over here today. I was listening to the RTE radio morning programme, Mary Wilson, and Mary summed it up, I think, quite simply. She said, who needed pictures when you could listen to Mícheál painting pictures?
What was
that
it,
was
though?
it.
Because he just had an amazingly creative way of using the language, both Irish and English, incorporating his knowledge of stats and players. But do you know what I loved most about him is the respect he had for the players and the managers. You know, some people mightn't have had the best game, but he still had respect, still had a fond word to say of everybody.
That was always an important thing for any broadcaster, be a commentator or a presenter or whatever. If somebody is having a bad day, and you get bad days no matter what you're doing in life, people like him and others like Ger Canning or whatever the case may be, you know, the trick is not to nail somebody, you know. Call it, yeah, of course, you have to call it, but not nail it. And he was kind of in that category. But Tommy, you said a second ago there that one of the things that I think people will remember most about Mícheál, apart from his fluency of commentary, his ability to wander back and over between Irish and English, you know, and to make them, which they are. If anybody comes, as I do myself from the west of Ireland, from near Connemara, it's not two languages, it's one language. And he got that totally, like, you know, slip in and out, a few words of Irish, a few words of English here and there, you know, and that just kind of gave that, as Mary Wilson said this morning, that pictures and sound.
The interesting thing, sorry, Muireann, is that I know when I played, that moment that you would be, you know, the half an hour before you would go out onto the pitch, that was very, very important. However, the last thing you ever wanted to see was anybody from the media, and media were not allowed in. There was always one exception. Mícheál, at some stage, would just wander in and he would go round and he would have a word with one or two people. Nobody,
Really?
yeah, he always had full access to the change rooms because, again, people trusted him. And you could be sure that something that he would see or hear or feel in the changing rooms, he could, you know, he would weave that into his commentary. You know, I've been down in the changing rooms and I just felt that the Armagh setup was a bit more relaxed. And he always was able to use that. And he did it in a very unobtrusive way. But again, his commitment to the Irish language and his promotion of the Irish language is something that will definitely stand by him, because there will be a lot of people, particularly in this state, who would have almost have felt traumatised by their classroom experience of Gaeilge. But the way Mícheál was able to speak it, so many, I remember him saying one time that if Irish people knew as much of French or German as they know of Irish, they would be boasting about it. So why not use the little bit of Irish that you have? And he did that.
And I'm sure he always had a couple of fuckle for the star himself. Kieran, how are you doing this morning? You were incredibly close with your fellow Kerryman. You knew him very well. I know he liked to slag. One thing we're hearing about him is his Machiavellian tendencies to get into people's minds when it came to golf. But for everything else, nicest man alive. How are you doing? How are you feeling today?
Well, look, obviously yesterday was a kind of a stop in your moment kind of track. It stopped you in your tracks. It definitely did with me in a way. You know, he obviously lived to a great age, but packed more into that than anyone else. But yeah, no, there was a certain. I was obviously kind of away in his zone after I heard it for a long while yesterday to gather myself, and it was just. I met him, obviously. He came in with Jarlath there with the underdogs. He coached me. He was at my wedding. He launched my book. He was, you know, always there in the end of the phone call if there was anything to talk about. And like Jarlath said, he'd come in before games. He'd have a little word. He was an amazing man, and what he did for the GEA, both in Ireland and around the world. It'll be hard to ever see it matched. And the way he did it, as Jarlath said, with just so much purity, that West Kerry brogue that flowed out of him. It was truly something that will be missed, has been missed since he retired, and I don't think anybody wanted him to retire, even when he did. But no, just to pass on to Eamon and Darren and Helena and all the rest of the kids, to pass on condolences from myself and everyone in Kerry and throughout the country.
We're just seeing the passion that he brought out in the wonderful Gaelic, like the football, the hurling, everything that it just embodies, and it came out of him onto the radio. Explain to me now. You mentioned the underdogs, so he was a selector, I think, for that, and the underdogs team that beat Kerry, and he put together, is it a visualisation, a tape for the team to listen to on the bus on the way to the match for the underdogs to actually beat Kerry that day.
Yeah, I think there was probably a lot of nerves on the underdogs team that time. There was obviously so many players that had never played with their county going down to take on the All-Ireland champions in Austin Stacks Park. So there was a lot of nerves around. Speaking to Jarlath before he came on there, he was saying that there was a few fellas upset that they weren't on the 15 for the big day. But yeah, it was visualisation, I suppose, Tommy, before we knew what visualisation was in a way. We got into the bus outside the Earl of Desmond. It's about a 6-minute drive inside Austin Stacks Park. We all got in, we all sat down. There was tension around the place. And next thing, the lights went off in the bus and Mícheál's voice came on. And Kerry were 4 points up. And Mícheál went into 6 minutes of full flow, as he could only do, speaking about the underdogs. Every single player got a mention. Fellas were kicking pints from 70 yards on the outside of the boot. Fellas were climbing majestically into the air around the middle of the field to catch ball. But this comeback story started in the commentary, and I remember him saying, and now they're really rolling. And he was getting it going. And it got to the point where we won by a score in the last minute. And as we pulled up to Austin Stacks Park, it finished with the underdogs beating Kerry goosebumps on the back of everybody's neck. We got off the bus into the dressing room. There wasn't a word, and then went out, and we were down in that game against Kerry and found a way to come back to get to extra time and actually won it in extra time. I think the fitness that Mickey, Ned, Mícheál and Jarlath put us through in that 3 or 4 months before that probably saw us over the line against the Kerry team that were after winning in All Ireland, and I certainly probably enjoyed the celebrations. But it was an unbelievable moment. That moment getting out of the bus, you could almost feel that, yeah, we can actually do this. Whereas I think before we got into the bus, I think an awful lot of people mightn't have felt we could have beaten them.
Yeah, it was such a big thing, and for him, like, he's just so soothing. He made everyone believe they could do what they want. And yesterday, former RT head of sport and his producer for a very long time, Ian Corr, said he loved this notion of GAA as a village, Michael. That he'd be going visiting lads that had won an All Ireland medal 50 years before. He'd visit everyone. He'd do anything. That's what he leaves behind. Just a beautiful legacy for GAA.
Oh, 100%. And not only that, but for greyhound racing as well, Jared. He was a huge... I actually remember one night travelling down the country with them from Dublin, down actually to Kerry. We were going to an event. He chose to drive. That was a bad idea. But on the way down, we stopped in... I remember Clonmel being one of them. There was a greyhound race meeting on, and then we stopped in, I think, Mallow or someplace else. And I'm thinking to myself, geez, you know, will we ever kind of get there? But he loved sport, as we all do. And greyhound racing was a big thing with him, and he had greyhounds himself and all that kind of stuff, you know. But I think Starr mentioned there about the golf. Didn't play golf with them, because that was a bad idea.
Yeah.
He
Got
was a
into
good
people's
golfer.
minds. Yeah, he got into
The one
people's
thing I would
minds.
say about him was that he was a beautiful man in every respect. He was so eloquent, but the most thing that I would say about Mícheál was he was very gentle. He was a gentle person, but he was nobody's fool. And if you listen to Kieran, well, Kieran went on to win an All-Ireland star, and in his very last commentary, 2010, a second member of that underdogs team won an All-Ireland from centre-half back for Cork, Pearse O'Neill. Both discovered by Mícheál Muircheartaigh.
Wow.
An incredible mind and an incredible man.
And of course,
would be
he
an
used to
incredible
train
miss.
teams in Dublin, across the road actually from RT over in UCD. He used to train the Kerry team, Jared, but also others as well. Other
I listened to him
players.
talking about that as well, said that he brought out the best in those players as well. Listen, a wonderful man, a wonderful voice, and a wonderful member of the GAA community, which is what it is all about. Mícheál Muircheartaigh, condolences, of course, to his family and friends this morning. Michael Esther, Jarlath Burns and Kieran Donaghy, thank you so much for joining us to look back on your fond memories of a special man.
Looking forward to seeing what the GAA will be doing, of course. We know there's going to be tributes throughout the season for this wonderful, wonderful man. Now it's